This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups, and my guest today is Mita Bedi. Mita, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Thank you, Kevin.
Appreciate you being here. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I live in the beautiful city of Sydney. Sunny weather, 9 months in the year, beautiful beaches, and a great atmosphere. So I'm very lucky to have grown up here. My parents sort of migrated here about 35 years ago from India, and I grew up in Sydney from kindergarten. And my family's background, I guess, if anyone knows about the Indian caste system, is my father comes from a sort of a clan in India that are the warriors, and my mother comes from a clan which are the tradesmen or the business people that were lived on the Silk Route. So they've been doing business for thousands of years. So genetically, I'm sort of a business warrior, if we call it that way. I'm also a mother of two beautiful children, a 5-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl. And I grew up in a part of Sydney which a lot of migrants live in, and I went to a public school. And then I decided to do engineering, software engineering, about 20 plus years ago. And I was 10% of the cohort of girls that ended up doing software engineering in those days. And then I decided I would be a developer, an actual coder in amongst teams of predominantly or mostly or even the only girl at many times. And I ended up doing that for about, I'd say 8 or 9 years in different organizations, a lot in financial services, in software services companies, both on the consulting side and the client side. And I really enjoyed doing that. And I think being the only girl a lot of times on the floor of large software shops was very interesting. I got to be the soft side of the software business, really have discussions with business. What were the problems we were solving? You know, technology for the sake of technology didn't really enamor me. I was like, what is this delivering? I would challenge the boys on a lot of days. I became very good friends with them. I also would translate a lot of the gibberish to the business. And I found myself always toggling in between technology and business. And I really enjoyed that because it gave me a lot of purpose in what I was doing. Were we delivering the right outcomes? Were we delivering the right estimates? And all of that became really important to me. So that made me move into my second avatar from my engineering days. And I said, hey, I really enjoy this business. And my mom had, you know, I had grown up in a business where she ran a fashion business as well. So I decided to quit work after 9 years and go and do an MBA. How cliche is that?
Absolutely.
And I sort of quit work for a year. And went against a lot of my friends' advice. You've got a good life in Australia. Why would you go overseas and go work hard for a year? But that was a year that really challenged me and invigorated a lot of what I wanted to do, how to change the world, all the bubble that an MBA lives in. I also ended up meeting my better half there, my husband. So it was a big year for me. And it was also the year of the GFC, so 2009. And I graduated at a time when I was learning a lot and I was watching the world and its markets really sort of collapse in a way.
I mean, were they in their recovery then, or was it actually, I mean, was it kind of at the trough?
In the middle of it. So in that year when I graduated, most people had retracted their offers. Most people had, you know, where a company would come and give 15 offers, they were just giving 2 or 3. And it was a tough year to graduate in, but it made everyone tougher, I guess. Everyone walked out with a job, maybe not the one they wanted, or maybe not a career they were looking for as they went in, but it built a lot of muscle. It built a lot of fundamental, what did I learn? How can I use this, rather than here's a nice college degree and let me just walk into the next cushy job style. So it was really
So where
good.
did you land from your, where did you do your MBA study?
So this is interesting. I decided to go back to India to do an MBA, which was quite different way to look at it. I wanted to be in a very hyper Asia was booming, India
Mm-hmm.
as well, and it was a very high entrepreneurial environment and very high activity. And so I said, look, I've always lived in Australia. I've done all my education here, and it's a good chance to challenge myself living overseas, as well as learning business and trade from a different perspective, at a different pace, at a different scale, I would
Sure.
say. And so I ended up going to a school in India, which was jointly started by Wharton and Kellogg. So it was a business school that started, that has most of its teachers coming from Wharton and Kellogg. And so, but it was set in the Indian setting. So it was a very interesting year for me. And it was a 1 year condensed course. So I had a less of a jump out of working in
Right.
a way.
Now Wharton is connected to University of Pennsylvania, correct?
Yes,
And
exactly.
Kellogg
Yeah.
is it Michigan? What?
Northwestern, I
Oh,
think.
Northwestern. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these are two highly prestigious schools in the States that you just connected there, and I
Yeah.
mean, business schools. And so when you stepped out, were you thinking when you went to get your MBA, were you thinking the entrepreneurial track, or were you thinking kind of corporate track, or what was on your mind?
I think I went in with quite a blank slate, unlike a lot of my cohort. I went in because I just wanted to learn. I wanted to learn new things, and I ended up majoring in something completely different to what I thought I'd go in and major. I thought I'd go in and major in finance because I
Hmm.
had 9 years of financial industry experience. I ended up majoring in strategy and marketing. I really fell in love with marketing because I felt like it brought behavior and economics and why people do things and how it ties into business. And I found it very strategic and very sort of bringing the soft and number side together. So after an MBA, I joined a company called International Business Machines, or
Yeah,
more friendly known as IBM.
IBM. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
When I want to avoid telling people I work there, I always use the longer name, and they're like, "Oh, okay, sounds interesting." So I joined the international consulting cohort where we had a global team jumping around the world in banking projects, large banking projects, and working through sort of the sales, the deals, $100 million style deals. And I sort of said, okay, this is not necessarily what I'm passionate about. So then I jumped out of that, joining one of the largest corporates, and learned a lot there. And then I said, I need to do something of my own. So then I jumped in and started my own e-commerce business in India at that time. And this is where my background, growing up in my mother's business in fashion, I started a B2C fashion business in a very hot e-commerce market. And this is where I got my real MBA. So I
Exactly.
actually had to unlearn everything I did learn in big corporate speak, being sort of an MBA is really designed for joining a large corporate in mid
Hmm.
management. And when you're starting your own business in your own garage, a lot of that theory doesn't hold, although all the fundamentals I think still hold. So I had to really practice and look at the fundamentals of what I had learned, but really not get wedded to some of the cases of, Northwest Airlines, or this was a
Right.
small operation. So I joined that, and that was an amazing experience of a year and a half where I got to really be an entrepreneur from scratch, like create value from scratch, create my first customers, supply chains. In India, having to work with regulatory authorities for payments and banking accounts and getting income tax clearances, and it was a whole new world of opening a business, basically.
Mm. And I mean, just I would imagine the bureaucracy
Yeah,
is unparalleled, and even depending on where you are in the country, there are different rules and different ways
absolutely.
of navigating and maneuvering. So,
And absolutely remembering that I'd never lived there, and I had grown up predominantly in Australia, completely through the Australian system, and never faced a bureaucracy or a system that was very different. I would say there's different rules of the game and different
yeah,
levers, and it's not good or bad. I just think you have to have grown up in it to understand like how it works, and you can't work the Indian system with the Australian rules, just as you
right.
couldn't do vice versa. So it was amazing. It was an amazing opportunity to be humbled and go, okay, this is, you can be, you know, idealistic in the way you're trying to get payments happening here, but it's very different. You're going to have to learn to work with the system, and it does work, but you got to go with the tide.
So you kind of stepped out of your MBA, you went to work with IBM for a while, you started your
Yeah.
e-commerce business, and then transitioned to, I mean, walk us through the transition to what you're doing today.
Yeah, perfect. So this was all in India. So I ended up, I went for a year to do an MBA because I met my better half there. I ended up staying there. And so all of this happened working in IBM, having my own startup while I was in India. And then me and my husband said, look, you know, it was time to start a family, and we needed to be close to, you know, parents and grandparents to really have that support. And so we decided to shut everything, and it was a big move. Both of us had careers in India, and we said, okay, well, for the long haul, we're probably a good time to move now back to Sydney. So I moved back to Sydney, and that's sort of when I sort of hit the Sydney um, job market, took a job because we needed to pay rent. And I said,
Hmm.
look, I will walk into whatever is the easiest. Now is not a good time to start another business,
Yeah.
because we were both settling into a new economy and, you know, getting our friends and our family and all our routines sorted. And I also was like pregnant with Sophia at that time. And so after Sophia was born, um, I was heading back into a big bank here in Sydney after maternity, in a senior role. And a recruiter um, knocked on my shoulders and said, "Hey, Mita, there's a small company up the road. We were probably the size of this room that I'm just this meeting room, and I think you should go and meet them." And I said, "Look, I've just had my first baby. I'm a first time mom. Now is not a good time to go and meet a startup. I'm really just looking forward to heading back to work and, you know, just settling in. I was nervous going back to work as a mom." He said, "Oh, no, no, just go and meet the team." So I went and met. I walked home, and Jacob, my husband, said, "Oh, what happened?" And I said, "Oh, look, I met this little startup, and there's 6 or 7 people, 8 people maybe at the time, and they have an amazing proposition, and everything is a little bit broken. And it's sort of that perfect middle between having my own business and doing it alone, but also having a team and sort of." And I said, "But I'm not going to take the offer. It's a 30% pay cut from the banking job, and Sophia's too young." And Jacob um, actually said, "Look, I haven't seen your eyes light up in a long time. So how about you go and take the job and you do this, and we'll work Sophia out. And look, if it doesn't work out, uh, you go back to the corporate career because you have about 12 years of experience in that, and a lot of people that back you and your previous bosses." So I ended up taking the job, and, you know, ended up doing just about everything in the company. Although my role was product manager,
Hmm.
I ended up doing sales and pre-sales and onboarding and business analysis and CTO roles, and, you know, just about everything. And I was really loving it. And one thing led to the next, and I ended up becoming a key partner in the company, taking a large share of the company, becoming the CEO. And yeah, sort of it became part of me in a way, and I've landed up here. So what was sort of just a let's try something out, ended up being sort of another baby that I have now.
Yeah, and now you have three. That's exactly right. So walk us through the initial, I guess, business plan or idea of the startup versus what it looks like now. What's been the transition, or has
Yeah,
it been pretty consistent with the business plan?
no, I think it hasn't been consistent with the business plan, and that's part of the fun of being in a startup,
For
is
sure.
that plans keep changing, and it attracts people that like to change plans all the time and that are not the hyperly planned people. So I guess the company was initially doing a lot of services, and as I came in as the first manager and coming from a marketing background, because the domain was very much analytics and marketing, so I was like, wow, this is this is a great opportunity. Actually, this solves a great problem for customers. It allows them to understand what their customers are saying. So it allows them to understand the demand curve much better. And it also allows them to understand what the employees are saying. So it allows them to understand the supply curve better. And lo and behold, if you can understand this demand and supply curve better than your competitors, then you end up running a better business and not being a commodity, and being able to differentiate and having that intelligence. So we ended up productizing a lot of that into building sort of an enterprise grade product. We also had the privilege of onboarding some great customers. We had one Walmart in China, a small Australian company winning a large American conglomerate in the largest, one of their largest markets in
Mm,
China.
yeah.
Really allowed us to build out capability in multilingual platform, being able to understand culturally how our customers different across the board, and being able to scale. We were getting 10 million transactions a day from Walmart in China,
Wow.
which allowed us to really test out the scale of the platform, and
Hmm.
also build, coming from a technology background and an engineering background, saying we have the chops to be able to do this, to be able to crunch that much data. And so we started dreaming a lot bigger than, you know, we had initially planned out to. So,
That is amazing. I mean, that's a major client that you landed in your portfolio. So when you built your business, was it highly dependent on that one client, or was it diversified enough that you could, could stand if they decided to go, elsewhere? Or how did you kind of navigate that as the CEO? Were you the CEO at the time, or?
I wasn't the CEO at the time. I was during the time. So
Hmm.
I was a product manager and sort of the account manager at the time of winning it. So very good question. So we had a few of these in our portfolio, and we have a few enterprises along. And Walmart sort of worked with us. Walmart in China worked with us for 3 to 4 years. Jim Thompson, who was the CEO at the time, really worked closely with us, allowed them to be more competitive in the market, allowed them to gain insight. But no, we weren't dependent on this account. We very much knew that we were building out. And so we had many accounts in the portfolio, because we understood that, hey, this is a real, we had, and the interesting part was we didn't just have one domain as well, because we had financial services clients, we have healthcare, and we have retail. And so a very diversified portfolio, which allowed us to see in the early days. I know a lot of people say, go down one domain and really specialize. In the early days, when you work with different domains, although it's harder, it allows you to see for which industry does it really solve a problem for, and which one is it a nice to have.
Right.
And you know, it's a real broad spectrum in the early days, because firstly, it's required for survival. I won't walk away from that. But also it's required for you to learn. Like, you can't go in with a hypothesis and think that you know everything. So as we started to work very closely with financial services, healthcare, retail, we understood actually their use cases and their cost cases are very different. And although there's a lot of similarity, there is a lot of difference. And in terms of how they use this data
Hmm.
and what their business is. So we got a real great insight into many different businesses, which is something I'm very passionate about, business. And so I got to work with different CEOs in these industries going, actually, what problem does it solve for you? Because they all have individual problems
Yeah.
that they're
Yeah.
solving. Yeah.
And I mean, I like the way you kind of, outline how data has to be interpreted differently
Yeah.
in different spheres and different industries. And I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking about just the benefit even to your company of having a diversified portfolio is, your data would tell you different things, based on the client even, and based on
Yeah.
the environment that the
Absolutely.
client operates in. So if
Yeah.
you just had one client, it may be, the data may be true for that client, but it may be skewed for an industry or even just for an economic environment as a whole. So,
Yeah, or even
um,
a
yeah,
country. Like, we today serve global clients
yeah,
around the world.
that's a good
And
point.
culturally they're very different and their customers are very different. So how a
Right.
customer purchases in Germany is very different to how they purchase in, not my customers, but their customers.
Yeah.
And so, although it's very difficult for when we onboard someone in the company to understand all this diversity, it's very good for us as founders to really understand, hey, there's a real opportunity here, or actually, we're solving a much bigger problem here than we are in this industry. So,
Yeah.
which one should we actually push the pedal on?
Right. And I mean, actually, you have to understand that as well, because I mean,
Yes,
you're looking for clients in these different countries, and they have, and
absolutely.
they respond to, the sales pitch differently. So
Absolutely.
speaking of the sales pitch, you and I are
Yes.
going to step on a lift right now. We're going to go up 10 floors. You've got
Yep.
45 seconds to tell me exactly what your company does.
Um, so, my company, resonate.cx, um, we really allow organizations to get intelligence on why their customers are buying from them, why their customers are not buying from them, and which customers are likely to buy more or less from them over time. So, what that allows organizations to really do is not just compete on price, but compete on true value that they're delivering that they may not know. So, uncovering the value that an organization is delivering to the end customer, and then pushing the buttons on that value to ensure that they don't lose value in a very price competitive environment. So how does an organization differentiate? Which segments should they differentiate in? And where should they spend every marketing dollar or every operational dollar
Mhm.
to stay relevant in a very rapidly changing consumer environment? So we really allow organizations to gain competitive advantage at the end of the day and bring insight into that.
So looking at your website, I mean, I see a lot of reference to NPS, or Net Promoter Score.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
is this is this built around that particular variable, or is that just one facet of really what you're providing?
Um, it is sort of, that's the genesis of how we started. So a partner at Bain and Company who was close to us said, actually, there's this thing called NPS, and you have a very smart technology team. Can you operationalize an NPS program, a Net Promoter Score program for one of Australia's largest retailers? And being the company that we were and the reflex, we go, yeah, we'll give it a go. And they said, can you do it in 2 weeks? And we're like, yeah, we'll give it a go. And what we realized, by giving it a go, working so close to these thought leaders, was this was going to be big. This was a metric, whatever you may feel about it, that would allow organizations to move away from just doing once a year market research to understanding every transaction and tying it into, did this transaction create loyalty or break loyalty? Did I end up losing a customer because I sold something and I delivered a certain experience? And why did one store in X suburb selling the same product have a bad experience, and why was one customer happy selling the same product? It wasn't going to be a product game anymore. It wasn't going to be a placement game anymore. It was more moving towards, what was a magical experience thing in the middle that we need to now codify?
Mm.
And so whichever metric we're a multi-metric system. So whether
Hmm.
you're looking at CSAT, whether you're looking at NPS, customer effort, whatever it may be, tying it into real-time experiences was going to become important. Not just, hey, this is what I feel about American Airlines. No, no. This is what I felt about this flight from this hub to
Yeah.
this hub at this time of the day. And this is how I feel as a gold customer. And
Right.
having that level of intelligence was going to change the game.
Wow. That, I mean, I can, you've kind of laid the story. You've actually told the story of the company there. And I can literally just picture, just the different approaches you've taken and the different metrics you're trying to measure. And not only that, is now you've got to, in essence, tell the rest of the story that says, this is how these fit together. This is how I'm going to interpret these for you, so you can actually have, marketable data. You can actually have usable
Yes,
data at the end. But
absolutely.
so walk us through, as the as a, you've done your own startup, you did your own e-commerce site, you've worked for large companies, multinationals, obviously, you've done your MBA, you've quit a nice corporate gig where you were probably earning a nice salary, and then you stepped into the CEO role of a virtually a tech startup, or a kind of a financial tech, fintech, whatever you want to call it. But
Yeah.
so what are two or three lessons that you have really learned in this process that you think every startup founder really needs to know, that here's two or three just really essential steps that you've got to do. They're foundational to really get a startup set up on solid footing so it has a good chance of success.
Yeah. And I think two or three are very hard because I learn a lesson a day, and sometimes there's too many lessons in
Just
this
grab the
world.
big ones.
So I will talk about the big ones. I think talking to as many people as possible
Hmm.
is really important in your target market. I am an engineer, a natural introvert, and talking didn't come very easy to me. I was a solution person. I wanted to solve, I wanted to make problems happen. But I learned, taking up the role and the responsibility that I have, that talking was even more important than finding the solution. Finding the problem was very important. So
Hmm.
talking to as many senior leadership people and asking as many questions as you can. And this sounds so trivial. It's very hard for people to do, to ask, to walk up to someone and say, is this really a problem in your business? If you could solve this problem, how much is it worth to you? What is the biggest problem? Like, otherwise, all the effort that you make in making the solution is just a waste. So what has been my biggest learning is questions are king, and finding the problem is what most startups get wrong. Finding the solution is the easy part. There's enough smart people to find a solution, but not enough sort of detectives in the industry that find the problem. And if you can get to that, you are way ahead of most startups. Finding the problem, really spending a long time dwelling on, is it really a problem? Is it really what we're looking for? So that's number one, really fall in love with the problem. Number two is understanding that it's a very long distance race.
Mm.
I think the media has done a really bad job in making everything look like an overnight success. And so I always tell the team about the story of the Chinese bamboo. I'm not sure if you've heard it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm sure you have, but it's really, really important for startups. So the Chinese bamboo is an unusual plant. So when the farmer puts a seed in the ground, they water it and they water it and nothing happens for months. And so they go out and water it and all they see is just dirt there, and they keep watering it. And the 1 year passes and nothing happens. They go out every day for the second year and keep watering this pile of dirt, and they keep watering it and they keep watering it. Year 2 passes, year 3 passes, and this farmer is so persistent that they just go out and water this piece of dirt every day, and there is not a shoot and not a single thing to be seen. Happens in year 3, year 4, year 5. What happens in years, sort of 5-ish, is that the Chinese bamboo grows 90 feet in sort of 5 weeks. It's rapid exponential growth. And when you ask someone outside what just happened, how long does it take for the Chinese bamboo to grow? And from the external, everyone watching, it's like, it took 5 weeks to grow 90 foot, but it actually took 5 years and 5 weeks to grow that
Exactly.
90 foot. And that is a really important story, that all the growth in a startup and in very tough environments and those people around you, most of the growth in the Chinese bamboo is happening underground. So it grows the biggest root system of any plant, vicious all around, creating a lot of potential energy to be able to suck up everything and grow like a bamboo in sort of five weeks. And that's the story of most great startups. There's a lot of underground growth that happens, and the lesson is that you keep watering it, even though people around you think you're a loony and why you're working so hard. And even your family, my close family sometimes has thought that this is this is crazy, the amount of hours and work you put into something that hasn't seen the rapid growth that it should have seen at times.
Hmm.
But most of the growth is happening underground, invisible, and you really have to have that faith that something is growing, and it will shoot up at some point if you keep persisting to water the plant.
Right.
Yeah.
So have you had your you've had your 5 year period. Have you had your 5 month period yet?
Um, Look, we have, and then Corona has joined us in the bandwagon of that. So the last 1 year has been phenomenal for the company and
Uh-huh.
its growth, and and what it has done for all of us is, as bamboo farmers, allowed us to have a lot of belief in what we had done over the last 5 years is really starting to show.
Yep.
And you know, that belief is going to be tested, if not more than ever, right now in
Right.
this environment for a
Right.
lot of startups. Yep.
I mean, what a way to kind of wrap up our chat today, because that's exactly the question I kind of wanted to touch on was, um, as I'm looking at this, I think there's a little bit of a temptation to almost see this as a luxury good in business versus a necessity.
Yes.
And so how are you positioning your company if if you got a CEO that's out there going, okay, what can we cut? You know, what's the first thing that we can cut? Like, we're going to cut our consultants, we're going to cut this, we're going to cut this, we're going to cut this. I mean,
Yeah.
how are you kind of trying to set, your company up to navigate that? And I mean, is that a fair depiction of where you kind of fit in the ecosystem?
Look, I think our relationships with a lot of the people that we work with, the fact that we work with a lot of senior leadership, and we are a tool that is used by CEOs. We see
Mm,
CEOs log into a tech platform, which is, you know, phenomenal in the
yeah,
given time frame. So it's a very important strategic piece. Coming back to my fundamental, it's not a time to go and preach to really senior people and leaders, because I empathize with them that you need this, you want this. It's a time to go and listen and talk and go, actually, what is the number one problem? How can data help you get more insight? Because the consumer needs are changing right now in this rapid environment like no one's business.
absolutely. Absolutely. And we
And
haven't
so
seen what the change is going to be either.
yeah, and so to stay on top of what the consumer wants fast enough are the companies that are going to survive this. So
Yeah.
from our perspective, is absolutely essential. And that's not because I'm biased towards it, to actually understand your consumer at this point more than any other point. Because every hypothesis that you had uh, pre-March is going to be questioned. And so
For
if
sure.
you're sitting in a room making a hypothesis now that this is what I think the market wants, it's a very scary place to be. So you want to be working with the data you have. If you have systems in place that give you leading indicators, then you want to be reading them really sharply at this point
Yeah.
and not working through lagging indicators. So in our conversations right now, they absolutely a strategic leading indicator, and they want to know what customers are feeling, not feeling, and how to pivot their own particular businesses in the right way. So it's really a crucial moment for them, for us to be, they're reaching out to us to provide more insight, more rapid insight, so they can make some big business decisions right now.
I think that Resonate Solutions is very, very fortunate to have you as CEO, because I mean, just your vision that you even cast just in the last minute about this whole idea that I'm not here to try to sell you to make sure you keep our service around. It's
Yeah,
I am trying to help you navigate this. That don't look
uncertainty.
at the lagging indicators, look at the leading indicators, because they're the one that's what's telling you what's happening now, because you
Yes.
can't trust the lagging because you can't look back and know how to navigate moving forward. So
Yes,
I love the way
absolutely.
you
This is
framed
your
that.
this
So
is this is sort of your navigation system on a plane that's lost all its engines and maybe a tail, and you need to land it now, and you don't
yeah,
want to lose a navigation system right
yeah.
now.
But
Yeah.
all you want to know is where that airport is ahead of you.
Yeah,
You don't care where you
absolutely.
took off
And what the
from.
passengers are feeling, you know, from an employee perspective, and where the
Yeah.
airports are and where the opportunity is, because although everyone is going through a moment of seeing a loss of opportunity, there's going to be a lot of opportunities ahead. Yeah.
I cannot wait to circle back with you in 6 to 12 months and just see exactly the way you've kind of navigated this difficulty. And I would love to be working side by side with you, because you really have cast a great vision in this time of real uncertainty. And it's just really good to hear. I have no vested interest in your company at all, but I just want to applaud the way that you are seeing this time and the way that you're trying to navigate through this. So I appreciate your the encouragement that other listeners would take, and the other founders that are listening to this will take in this difficult time. And just thank you again for just playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Mina, thank you for joining us
Thank you so
today.
much. Thank you so much.